Hello, it's nice to see you again. Hexblast is a one-of-a-kind spell in the Path of Exile that has many unique interactions. It is strictly associated with the hexes, hence the name. It deals very high damage on its own, but if it's targeted against hexed enemies, it will deal even more damage, and with much better area of effect. Usually, elemental skills rely on lowering foes' resistances through various ways, such as hexes or exposure effects, while chaos skills are mostly limited to Wither debuff and a single Despair curse. Hexblast, however, can take the best of the two worlds, as it will choose the lowest resistance of the struck enemy, while also being affected by the damage amplification from Wither. To solve the very low base crit chance of this skill, we simply use the Sandstorm Visage unique helmet. It sets your spell's critical strike chance to the base critical chance of your weapon, which in the case of wands, is usually very high. We also use Ralakesh's Impatience to generate all kinds of charges. It's a very powerful way of getting tons of damage, but it also gives crazy amounts of mind throw speed, which translates into even more DPS and great fluidity of the build. Hexblast can apply Ignite, Freeze, and Shock with its chaos damage, and since critical strikes will always apply them, you will be constantly freezing and shocking your opponents, which is a great damage and survival boost. The maximum life pool achievable is quite low, but thanks to the combination of grace, determination, and the skin of the lords, you will be very safe during regular encounters. As a Saboteur, you also have access to a very powerful blind aura, which lowers all damage dealt by blinded enemies. Mines will automatically target any nearby enemy, making this setup very fast and smooth for clear. This build is capable of dealing absurd amounts of damage against a single target. You can also preload some of your mines before boss encounter starts. At its core, it is a quite cheap and accessible build. It uses a lot of unique items and some rares to cap elemental resistances and attribute requirements. The build uses almost exclusively unique items. Most of them are rather cheap and easy to access and have a pretty simple way to an upgrade, via specific corrupted implicit, such as additional power charge on your helmet or elemental resistances on your belt. This helmet is necessary to fix the very low base critical strike chance of the Hexblast. You can obtain the additional power charge corrupted implicit here, but it's quite hard to do. It's a core item to generate all your charges. Standing still even for a moment will set you to your maximum charges, so you will have their benefits when you throw and detonate your mines. Minimum charges can't be consumed or stolen by monsters. There is no better weapon for a build that stacks a lot of power charges other than Void Battery. It adds a lot of spell damage and increases your power charge limit. It doubles the Hexblast critical strike chance when used with the Sandstorm Visage helmet. Malachai's Loop is another great piece of equipment for power charge stacking. As mentioned before, you can't lose your power charges, but you can still get shocked. That downside is completely negated by Saboteur Ascendancy. This armor provides an amazing boost to your survivability and damage at once. It increases levels of your main setup gems and all your defenses such as armor or evasion rating. Badge of the Brotherhood is a vital part of Charge Stacker. It makes all your maximum power charge investments apply to frenzy charges as well. Cooldown recovery for travel skills is quite useful for your flame dash, especially in the Forbidden Sanctum. Arn's Anguish is great addition to a charge stacking build. Each brutal charge gives you a 3% chance to deal triple damage. You can obtain a corrupted implicit that grants you elemental resistances here. It's used to apply your second curse with your skitterbots even before you make your first hit. It's best to give up the shock aura, as you will inflict much more powerful shock with your hits anyway. Inner Conviction granted by this jewel grants you a massive boost to your damage based on your power charges, and the downside of not getting frenzy charges is bypassed by our boots. Use the Path of Building tool to determine randomized modifiers on nearby notables. You can get an additional source of elemental penetration while affected by zealotry thanks to this jewel. Pair it with any useful defensive modifier for your determination or grace aura. Best pick here would be Unstable Infusion to get additional power charge, but you can also opt for more defensive notables, which Shadow has plenty of. In the end, you will wear only 2 rare items and a bunch of rare jewels. This puts pretty heavy stress on your resistances and attributes. You will need a lot of them there. It's important to get rare gloves with exposure on hit, and pair it with relevant elemental curse to maximize resistance reduction on enemies. If you desperately need additional elemental resistances or attributes, you can use a rare belt in meantime. Endurance charges in this setup are quite unreliable, as they constantly disappear, so don't rely on them to cap your resistances. You will need any elemental curse on hit modifier on your rare ring, supplemented by maximum life and resistances. Thanks to this, all your Hexblast's hits will be empowered. You will need a lot of elemental resistances and attributes here. You will also need plenty of maximum life. As for your Eldritch implicits, get a chance to unnerve enemies and any elemental exposure matching your curse from ring. You will have plenty of jewel sockets, and they should be used to boost your maximum life and fill remaining resistances or attributes. Once you have it sorted out, you can add some critical strike multiplier for your spells. Large cluster jewel is used mainly to get the jewel sockets. Try to get one that will grant you 2 useful notables while skipping the middle one out. It should also have the least amount of added passive skills to not waste any points. There are plenty of very useful notables here. It's also a great source of mine-throwing speed. Try to get one with Arcane Pyrotechnics notable to get Arcane Surge buff. You can get a very long onslaught buff from this flask, which greatly speeds up your shield charge usage and overall movement. Unfortunately, it doesn't affect your mine throw speed at all. As your remaining magic flasks, we recommend using Life Flask with Bleeding Removal, Jade Flask with an increased Evasion rating modifier, Granite Flask with an increased Armor rating modifier, and Sulfur Flask with additional attack speed. Hexblast deals high chaos damage to your target. If possible, consumes the hex with the lowest duration on the enemy to deal significantly higher damage in a large area of effect. High impact mine support causes you to throw mines that use Link's spell instead. It also grants you the detonate mine skill that you will need to trigger them. You will also need minefield support, which causes you to throw 4 additional mines but lowers their throw speed significantly. Wither applies a stacking debuff that increases the chaos damage taken by the enemy for a short duration. Spell Totem and multiple totem support are used to summon totems that cast this spell for you. They are very squishy, so try to place them away from danger. Zealotry is a very powerful aura that boosts your spell damage and critical strike chance. To be able to use it, you will need to link it with Divine Blessing and cast it as a short duration buff instead of a permanent aura. Grace Aura grants a lot of flat evasion rating and allows you to scale it very efficiently. Determination is very similar to the previous aura, but this time it adds armor rating instead. Summon Skitterbots is a very useful aura that increases any damage dealt with traps and mines, but also applies shock and chill. Linking those auras with enlightened support lets you reserve less mana. You will need as much mana as possible to preload the most amount of mines. Shield Charge performs a charge at the enemy or targeted location. It scales very well with both your attack speed and movement speed, that's why it's good to link it with the faster attack support gem. Molten Shell creates a protective barrier that increases your armor and absorbs a big portion of incoming damage. It's best to use it with cast when damage taken setup, since your left mouse button should be bound to detonate mines. Bear Trap throws a trap that slows caught enemy and increases the damage it takes from all your traps and mines for a short duration. Flame Dash is a quick blink that teleports you to the targeted location. Used to supplement your shield charge when you need to bypass terrain gaps. Conductivity lowers the lightning resistance and grants a chance to shock. You can also use Flammability or Frostbite, as it doesn't matter which element will you lower the most. Elemental Weakness lowers all elemental resistances of Cursed Foe. You should automate both of those curses with your rings, as explained earlier. We recommend helping a Lyra to get additional resistances and a critical strike multiplier. You can change it later when your gear makes up for that. Soul of the Brine King as your major Pantheon power paired with your Ascendancy will make you immune to all base elemental ailments in the game. You will need to upgrade it first, as the base version gives you only protection against stun locks. By picking Soul of Shikari for your minor Pantheon power, you greatly reduce the dangers of poisons. Getting meaningful chaos resistances would be really hard on this build. The leveling process is fairly easy with this build as you will pick many useful notables early on. Thanks to the charges mines, your charge investments won't be wasted, but to truly shine you will need to equip your endgame items such as the Badge of the Brotherhood. Eldritch Battery solves all your mana problems, but you will still need some free mana to be able to reserve it with your mines. Unfortunately, there are not so many maximum life notables on the passive tree, so it's really important to back it up with your rare jewels. You will also need a lot of attributes, especially strength and elemental resistances. You can help yourself with that by picking up specific notables that grant 30 of each attribute, but it's recommended to refund them later as they are quite wasteful. You should allocate Whispers of Doom quite early, as it will raise your curse limit on the enemies, allowing for a dual curse setup. Wither debuff is one of the best ways to improve your damage, so increasing its effect via corruption notable yields very good results. Pyromaniac Ascendancy notable grants you a lot of life regeneration, since you will throw a lot of mines and occasionally some traps. It also grants you immunity to shock to counter the downside from your shield. Militant Faith Timeless Jewel can quite randomly change the effect of adjacent notables. It's preferable that it doesn't happen, as it would take away your potential maximum charges. This is everything we have prepared for today. If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like or subscribe, and see you in the next one.